B-boy. From the old to the new, still a B-boy. Too bold for the school, still a B-boy. East coast to the west, B-boys worldwide. We supposed to be blessed, still a B-boy.
What's up, B-boys and B-girls? This week we're back with another roundtable, and we're going to where hip-hop started, the East Coast. We're going to discuss the top 10 East Coast albums. This was a hard list, guys. As always, I got Raven Hunter with me, and also joining us, Kane, the Hurricane. What's up, everyone?
What's up, everybody?
What up, man?
So I will, as always, start this off number 10, and I always hold up a CD booklet of the, albums I pick. And this CD booklet I actually had signed by the artist and in a frame along with the vinyl that he signed. I think Kane knows what road I'm going down.
Oh, yeah.
My number 10 is 1996's Chino XL Here to Save You All album. And when Kane and I went out to interview him in LA, I got everything autographed and signed. So this one was huge to me. It was lyrically groundbreaking, the crazy metaphors and puns he would use, and it had such an ill vibe with the ill lyrics. To me, it blew my mind. I had heard lyrical MCs. I had heard, by that time I was listening to Esham, so I heard crazy things, but Chino just mixed it all with this hip-hop vibe that just blew my mind. And this is around the time I'm starting to write myself, so I'm really appreciating the lyrics and the rhyme writing and whatnot. My top songs, I got No Complex, Many Different Ways, Deliver, Partner to Swing. What Am I is a great story because he's half Puerto Rican, half black, and he kind of feels like he didn't belong on each one. It's a great story. So number 10 for me, Chino XL, The Lyrical Jesus, Here to Save You All. Raven, what is your number 10?
Man, that's a great fucking pick. And that would have been like 11 or 12 for me. So I'm glad it got mentioned. Number 10 for me, I'm going with 2011 Apathy Honky Kong. I fucking love Apathy. He's from the Army of Pharaoh's crew with Self-Titled and all them, and he's a really good lyricist. He's fucking flows perfectly, and I guess I always related to him. I'm a hip hop head from the East Coast, so I grew up on hip hop music. Always loved Jedi Mind Tricks and Army of the Pharaohs because of that shit, and so Apathy's my second favorite person from that group. I love Self-Titled. His voice and flow is really like no one else's, so it always stood out to me. And the song that he was on the album was Stop What You're Doing, which had some Digital Underground samples and shit. It's one of my favorite songs coming out in like the New York, Philly area. And he had The Villain with Ill Bill, Honky Kong with Vinny Paz. And yeah, The Recipe with Exhibit is another just killer song on that album. So if you haven't heard Honky Kong, I definitely recommend you peep that. That's my number 10, and I knew it would have to make the list, so it made number 10.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Apathy and know Jedi Mind Tricks and everything, but I'm not familiar with that release. I'm gonna have to check it out because I like Jedi Mind Tricks and all the people you were mentioning. All right, Kane, what's number 10 in your life?
I knew there was some I was gonna forget. I totally forgot about Chino XL. Like I was like, these guys are gonna say, I'm gonna be like, oh yeah. Number 10, I got Kiss of Death by Jadakiss. I think this album, when he did it, rappers get in that zone where, and I'm not a big fan of all other Jadakiss's stuff, but I think this album, he was really just in that zone, and you can let the album play through. Some of my favorite tracks are Why with Anthony Hamilton, You Make Me Want to with Mariah Carey, By Your Side. That's a song that he uses the chorus, and I'll be by your side. Like
yes.
Welcome to D Block featuring Eminem. There's a ton of good tracks on there.
I think there's a song with DJ Quick on there.
Yeah, Snoop and DJ Quick. Yeah.
That is a dope album.
It had a really killer single too. It was very clubby and shit, but I always loved the beat from that first single off that album.
No, that's a good pick. I didn't even think of that one. So, all right, number 9. This was off my list all the way until yesterday, and then I couldn't. It had to be on my list because this is my hip hop genesis. 1985's Run DMC King of Rock. This is the album that sparked it for me, it blew my mind. But personally, or not personally, but as far as Run DMC, they had completely changed the industry 2 years earlier with their self-titled, which had Sucker MCs. They come back with this one, and the title track, King of Rock, I mean, they take it to the next level, not just because it was the first song that caught my ear. Run DMC in general was so important in this era. And my top songs, of course, King of Rock, You're Blind, because you're blind, you can't see, you need to get some glasses like DMC. You Talk Too Much, and Can You Rock It Like This? There's only 10 tracks on this album, because back in the day, that was a pretty normal for an album that only have about 10 tracks, but they're pretty much all dope. Head of their time, Run DMC, King of Rock, changed my life. Raven, what do you got at 9?
I'm glad you mentioned that album. As we were talking before, I was upset I couldn't get them on the list. That was on my honorable mentions. Number 9 for me would be LL Cool J's 14 Shots to the Dome, 1993. In the LL Cool J episode, I sucked this album's dick pretty hard, to be honest. I really like this album. It's not his perfect album. It's not the best album, but it's my favorite album from him. You know, How I'm Coming, Bucking Them Down, Pink Cookies in a Plastic Bag, No Frontin' Allowed. There was just a lot of classic hard LL, and you could tell LL was being influenced a little bit by the West Coast and shit in this album. It sounds way different than most of his other albums, so that's why it always stood out to me.
You're all on the dick of 14 Shots to the Dome.
Yeah, there was like 3 or 4 songs on my LL Cool J list because of that shit. Like, I love that album.
And I love this song that no one else really loves, Funkadelic Relic, always pops me. I like
it's
that
a good song, but yeah, it actually, I always forget about it when I go back to think about my favorite songs from that album.
Kane, what do you got at number 9?
I got Love Lost by Joe Budden. I'm such a Joe Budden fan. I love his writing. Like, I love that it's so emotional. I love that he has a line that says, I make the pen bleed when he writes. And that's like, it's so about relationships, and it's so about, these vulnerable things that everybody feels, and he just puts it all out there. And All Love Lost is his best album in my eyes. Some of my favorite songs is Playing Our Part, Slaughtermouse, where he goes through and talks about the ending of Slaughterhouse, All Love Lost, Make It Through the Night, and Love, I'm Good. Those are my favorite ones off that. But yeah, I just love how he puts it all out there when he writes. I wish he would do more stuff. I know he's been done rapping for a while now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I would definitely call that his best album too.
Yeah,
I would agree with that as well. He really, from his first coming into the game, was like pump it up. How he evolved to where he got was, he really evolved as an MC. Okay, number 8. I'm going back to 1996. This one, no one maybe would have thought of. But this album, I love front to back. I love it. 1996's Jeru the Damaja, Wrath of the Math. Oh. This entire album, the whole album, was produced by DJ Premier. You know, when you're listening to a CD and the DJ Premier produced song comes on, you're like, it takes it to the next quality. Every song is produced by DJ Premier. The whole fucking album. And this is 96. Primo's in his prime. This is Jeru's second album. It's just so dope. It's mid-90s East Coast at its finest, lyrical, and of course, the beats is what puts it over the top. Primo in his prime. You got the song, probably the most famous one on it, One Day, where he talks about, getting hip-hop back from Puffy and Suge and Not the Average, You Played Yourself. Physical Stamina with Afu Ra, Black Cowboys. It's got a little bit of Fuji's diss in there, and Frustrated Brother. But the whole album, front to back, is just it screams East Coast hip hop. So Wrath of the Math had to make the cut for me. That's my number 8. What's your number 8, Raven?
I can't believe I didn't think about that album. I remember buying that album release date of Sam Goody on CD, and I fucking love that album. So
Wait a second.
I can't believe I forgot it.
I got a great story about this album, and I forgot to talk. So when this dropped, I went to Sam Goody to buy the CD. So I buy it, I, get in my car and put it in, and I realized I accidentally bought the edited version. So I knew from previous times that if you open, they wouldn't return it. So I don't remember what I took. It was a knife or something sharp, and scratched the shit out of the disc. Went back in and said, I just opened this and look at the disc. So then I could go back and get an explicit one.
Nice.
So that's my Wrath of the Mass story. But anyways, I digress. What's your number 8?
My number 8 is AZ Pieces of a Man from 1998. I love that album. It's AZ, I think at its peak, everybody loves Do or Die, but I always thought Pieces was way more emotional and personal, which I loved. It was produced by Track Stars, which at the time they were really popping off on the east side. How You Living with Nas was a big song. Sosa was the shit. Pieces of a Black Man is my favorite song. The Birth was the RZA. Like there's just a lot of killer tracks on that album. It's very East Coast sounding. But it was definitely AZ at his rawest and realest. So I think he flowed his best in everything in this album.
Yeah, AZ doesn't get talked about probably enough. Kind of gets overshadowed because he's always with Nas, right? And Nas is always going to be
I
bigger
always
than
liked
him.
AZ's I liked his voice better than Nas's voice.
Yeah, and he's got, I mean, from the beginning with like Sugar Hill and the stuff he was doing with Nas, amazing. Nah, that's a good pick. I like that pick. Kane, what is your number 8?
So I'm probably breaking the rules on this one, but I did DJ or Fresh Prince and DJ Jazzy Jeff's greatest hits because
Oh,
I, I couldn't I couldn't pick
couldn't pick
one.
one.
There's I wanted them on the list, and I was like, I like this song from this album, this song from this album. And I was like, well, they did a greatest hits album. I'm sure it's against the rules, but
Who gives a fuck? I had He's the DJ, I'm the Rapper on my honorable mentions.
yeah.
That's on my honorable mentions as well. It almost made my list.
Yeah.
That's what I had in this spot. And I was like, there's no summertime on that album. Like I'm going through it and I'm like, I want these other songs on here. And
I always liked Home Base. Like that's a really underrated album.
It
Yeah.
is. You saw my blinker bitch.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Who Stole the DJ? I mean, that's a cool story. I think Will Smith is underrated as MC, that he doesn't get the respect he deserves from what he did. I mean,
100%.
he never gets the props. He never gets mentioned about in that era. It's too bad because he was a dope rapper, but great storytelling and just made good music.
Mhm.
And Jeff is one of
Made
the
fun music. Like they
fun
made
music,
fun
right?
music.
Right. Jeff is a A plus plus DJ. I'm glad they got brought up, so I'll let it be.
Thanks.
Number 7. I know Kane likes this album, I think, because I used to listen to it nonstop on the way to studio. So maybe he doesn't like this album anymore. We're going to 2000 and De La Soul, Artificial Intelligence, Mosaic Thump. I was a fan of De La, but when this came, it completely flipped my wig. I thought De La took it to a next level. I mean, everything great about De La Soul is this album. Plus, they had dope features. They had a song with the Beastie Boys. They had a song with Redman. They had a song with Busta Rhymes. They had a song with the Licks. And of course, this album has the infamous Ghost Weed skits. One of the best skits ever, in my opinion, is the Ghost Weed skits.
You sound nice, man.
So I love this album. I played it nonstop when I got it. Just played it nonstop. So top songs are Ooh with Redman, You Can Do, Through Your City, Squat, My Rights, The Art of Getting Jumped. Bumpy Knuckles is also on this album. De La Soul, Artificial Intelligence, Mosaic Thump. Number 7. Raven, what's your number 7?
My number 7 would be 1995's Eric Sermon. Damn, I forgot to write the album title down.
Double or Nothing?
Double or Nothing. Yeah, Double or Nothing. That was my favorite era of Eric Sermon. I love Eric Sermon and them. I love Keith Murray. I love that whole Def Squad. But Bomb Diggy, Funk Out with Redman, Tell 'Em with Keith Murray, Welcome and Set It Off both had Keith Murray in it. Eric Sermon produced the whole album. It's just like prime classic Eric Sermon for me. Double or Nothing 95.
No, that's a dope album. That is a dope album. It's probably between that or No Pressure that are my favorite solo ones by him, but they're both great. All right, Kane, what do you got at 7?
I got The Tipping Point by The Roots. One of the coolest thing about The Roots is the live band. You know, I've always thought you don't get to see that too much in hip hop, you know. An album that I can just let play all the way through. After I did the greatest hits of Fresh Prince and DJ Jazzy Jeff, I was like, there should be a greatest hits of The Roots too, because there's a bunch of other songs that that I like off of other albums too. But no, The Tipping Point's my favorite from them.
Yeah, the Roots are dope. And what a deep catalog if you really think about it.
Yeah. They've been doing stuff for forever.
Forever. Yeah, mid-90s. But
I can't believe I didn't even think about the Roots on this list. That kind of hurts my feelings. I'm glad you brought them up.
I thought about them, but none of them really stood out over the other ones. I just really like all of them more than one's like, holy shit, this is my favorite. So that's why they didn't make my list. But the Roots get nothing but love. Black Thought, amazing MC. All right, we are at number 6 already. So this group, nobody agrees with me that this is their best album. And I understand why, because it's probably not their best album, but it's my favorite album. And this is my list, so fuck it. 1991, I'm going Public Enemy, Apocalypse 91, The Enemy Strikes Black. Of course, everyone always points to Nation of Millions. It is classic. Fearful Black Planet, also classic. There's just something about this album that I just loved it. And I love those other two also, but this was always a notch higher personally. I love the vibe. I think people forget how dope this album is. I also think it had an important moment. They did a remix of Bring the Noise with Anthrax, and this is 91. There wasn't a lot of rock rap, especially metal rap. You know, you had Aerosmith and Run DMC, and Ice-T was just doing Body Count. But just think, they did this in 91. By the end of that decade, it became such a trend that all the top groups, the Limp Bizkits and the Kid Rocks and all these people are mixing rock with rap. And Public Enemy, always a groundbreaking group. They were from the beginning, and they kind of broke ground, and I thought that was an important moment in hip hop. Also has probably my favorite PE song, which is Can't Trust It. Why? I don't know. I love that song. It hypes me up. So I got that down, Bring the Noise remix. By the time I get to Arizona, Shut 'Em Down, classic PE. Night Train, Move. It's my favorite PE album. It had to make it. Number 6, Raven, what do you got?
It's a good pick. My number 6 pick, I've talked about this album on multiple different shows we've done. 1995's Big L, Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous. Big L's one of my favorite MCs of all time, so he had to make the list. I wanted to put the Big Picture on here too, but I just couldn't put two albums on here, you know. And Lifestyles is what brought me into Big L. No Ends, No Skins, Danger Zone. Of course, the Posse Cut, The Graveyard. It had like Jay-Z's first verse in it. You know, Let 'Em Have It, L. There's so many just bangers on that. And he was such a gritty, just street MC, and that's what I always strive to do with my music. Is like I don't like horrorcore, I don't like gangsta. I just want to be a street MC. I make a real rugged sounded music. You know what I mean? And a lot of that came from Big L and Eazy-E. So.
And Put It On. I love that song. Put It
Yeah.
On by Kid Capri. And Big L was mad lyrical. You listen to his lyrics from 95, and he still, I mean, holds up lyrically. He had such great lines. Another one taken too soon. Think if we could have got another 5 albums out of him or something.
That one, he's one of the, you know, next to Eazy-E, he hurt the most because he had such a promising career. Like he was so fucking good.
Right. That whole Dig It in the Crates crew. But
yeah,
that album was on my honorable mentions, so I can cross it off. Kane, what is your number 6?
License to Ill by the Beastie Boys. I think this album really helped to start bridging the gap from rock to hip hop with Fight for Your Right. And, you know, they weren't the typical rap looking guys, you know. If 3 white guys, voices are funny. Yeah, I think it really helped, you know, bring more people to listen to hip hop than what previously was. Fight for Your Right, No Sleep Till Brooklyn, Girls, Brass Monkey, you know, all those are my favorite tracks off of that.
To this day, and it used to piss my ex-wife off because I did it every time. If someone asked me what time it is, I said it's time to get ill. No, that is such a groundbreaking album. It was on my honorable mentions. It did. It really helped bring, you know, like along with Run DMC, hip hop to a next level. Number 5 we are at, and I'm going to 94. Yes, shouldn't have had to check it. I should know these things. 1994, Gangstar, Hard to Earn, talking about Primo. So that really says a lot. 2 of my albums are completely produced by DJ Premier, who's probably my favorite producer of all time. I love Gangstar, and this is by far, in my opinion, their best work. Guru's on top of his game. Primo's on top of his game. It's everything I love about Gangstar. And Mass Appeal is my second favorite hip hop beat of all time. Nothing will ever surpass my number 1, but Mass Appeal is definitely number 2. Top songs besides Mass Appeal is Tons of Guns, Dwick, Code of the Streets, The Planet's a really cool story. Speak Your Clout, Posse Track, Gangstar. I had to show them love, and this album is dope from 1 to 14. So that's my 5. Raven, what do you got? 5?
I'm glad Gangstar got mentioned. They were on honorable mentions as well. Number 5 for me is 1994's Gravediggers 6 Feet Deep. I mean, this is kind of very early showings of horrorcore music in general, you know, with the Flatliners and shit. But this was like that perfect era of Wu-Tang. They were coming out of the 36 Chambers before Liquid Swords, just kind of I don't know, everything clicked for that whole camp at that time. And this bringing through Quan and the Grim Reaper and all them, man, I loved all those dudes. And it sucks the way the group fell apart and everything, that deaths happened and stuff. But that Nowhere to Run, Nowhere to Hide, 1-800 Suicide, Diary of a Madman. There's just so many fucking hard songs on there. And aside from like Bushwick Bill and the Ghetto Boys, I had never really heard people rap the way they were rapping in the Gravediggers album. You know what I mean? Bushwick had Chucky and all that shit years before that. So I always had that taste, but Gravediggers was like a whole album for that. Plus it had fucking Wu-Tang members in it. And Wu-Tang was life on the East Coast in those years. So had to show love to the little side off group Gravediggers.
No, I love that record. Constant Elevation. All right, Kane, what do you got at number 5?
I got Spiritual Minded by KRS-One. I'm not sure if that was his first album, and maybe you can tell me where he really came out as a Christian. You know, I don't know if there was any one before that where he really like,
Not to that degree.
yeah, to come out and where everybody else is talking about, you know, whatever, and come out, you know, putting his faith out there like that. It just so cool. The Tears song about September 11th, like
song.
that song still gets me. That song, like, you know, when they talk about the sniper watching the crowd as he salutes the flag at the beginning, like it's a real powerful song. My favorite tracks: Tears, South Bronx, 2002.
Yeah, that Tears is probably would make my top 10 KRS-One BDP songs, because it is.
100%.
That's a great record.
Glad he got some love.
Yeah, because I have 2 KRS-Ones on my honorable mentions. They just couldn't crack. One of them was on it, but I had to kick him off for Run DMC. KRS-One, one of my favorite MCs of all time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Number 4 we are at. Now, this album has a very West Coast vibe, but the rapper's from New York, so it's an East Coast album. 1995's Master Ace, Sitting on Chrome.
Great pick.
This, if you had a system in 1995, this shit bumped the fuck out of it. And this is me in high school. That's the year I got my driver's license, 95. and I always had to have, speakers that cost more than the car I was driving. And this whole album just bumped the shit out of it. But songs like Sitting on Chrome, The INC Ride, Born to Roll. I mean, those three songs alone should get this on a top 10 list. I love the storytelling of People in My Hood. Master Ace does not get talked about enough as a MC, as a writer, for what he's done. And each album has a different vibe. He never really, I always thought this sounded more like a West Coast record, and none of his other albums really had that vibe. But this one is probably my favorite Master Ace. Well, obviously it is.
Glad you mentioned that one. I remember listening to that with you, riding around.
So Master Ace, Sitting on Chrome. Raven, what do you got it for?
That was a great pick. I remember 96, my homie got his Dodge Neon and he had these giant Sonys in the back and we would just ride around listening to Born to Roll and shit all fucking night, just rattling the windows. Like
Right.
that's a great pick. I didn't even think of that. Let's see, number 4. Eric B. and Rakim, Follow the Leader from 1988. Most people would probably pick Paid in Full, but Microphone Fiend. I mean, that's really all I wrote for this album, Microphone Fiend. That's my favorite hip hop song of all time. That beat comes on, and even though it's so chill, it gets me so fucking hyped. Like, I really wasn't listening to hip hop yet in '88, but I can imagine people love that fucking song still to this day. So I can only imagine how it popped when it came out.
I had Paid in Full as my favorite on my honorable mentions, but all those early records by Eric B. and Rakim are dope. So that's a good pick. 4, Kane, what do you got?
I got The Blueprint by Jay-Z. This album has one of my favorite songs of all time, Song Cry, on it. I love the chorus. I can't see him coming down my eyes, so I got to make the song cry. That's another song that'll get me every time I listen to it. Like the last 7 songs of that album are just, every one of them is just crazy dope, And then Renegade with Eminem, and Eminem freaking kills it. It's like an Eminem song. It's not even not even a Jay-Z song. It's just, that's dope.
Initially it was Eminem featuring Royce, and when Jay wanted a track, he took Royce off.
Oh, really?
I forgot all about that. Yep.
Favorite songs: Girls, 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 Never Change, Song Cry, Renegade, Heart of the City. Yeah, just a ton of good tracks on there.
That was on my list for a few days because I can listen to that front and back. Great pick was on my honorable mentions, which brings us to the top 3. Originally, before I started diving deep, I didn't think this album would make my list, but then when I listened to it again, it went from not making my list to getting all the way up to number 3 because it's so fucking dope. 1994, we're going to Notorious B.I.G. Ready to Die. I mean, probably a top 10 if we ever do a list of debut albums. This probably is a top 10 debut album. So look at what's going on at the time. We got Bad Boy, besides Craig Mack and Flavor in Your Ear, and a little bit of R&B. That's all Bad Boy had done. And then they hit us with this. And I even slept on this to like the first few months until someone in study hall who knew I was a hip hop head asked me about it, and I said, "Oh, isn't that the guy from the Who's the Man soundtrack, which Party and Bullshit was on?" He's like, "Yeah, but you gotta listen to it," and he was right. So dope. So many dope beats produced by Easy Mo B. Similar to Big L. Imagine if we could get another 5 albums by Biggie. I mean, crazy. Every track is dope, but if I gotta pick some, it's Unbelievable, Warning, What a Story, Suicidal Thoughts, such a deep, dope song. Ready to Die, Juicy, of course, Things Done Change, Me and My Bitch, Give Me the Loot. I could just name them all.
Right.
So this first Biggie album is so amazing. Ready to Die, number 3. Raven, what's your number 3?
That's definitely in my honorable mentions. Biggie didn't make my list, but he's a legend, as you said. I slept on that album for a while. to be honest, when it first came out. And I'd hear him on like The Points, or I'd hear him on just other little guest verses,
Mhm.
and just kind of I slept on him. I was a Pac fan. They started beefing kind of right after that album came out.
The next
Like
year,
the next year. Yeah.
yeah.
So I didn't give Biggie the love he got until after the second album came out, and the first disc of that album is flawless. And so I went back and really gave love to the first album. That album, I've done 2 different diss songs to people over Biggie beats from that album, and I've also covered Juicy early in my career off that album. Like I came to love that shit. So that's good that he got his love. 1995 Genius Liquid Swords is my number 3.
There you go.
So in our one-on-one interview, I was really fucking high, and I said that Inspector Deck's my favorite member, and he's actually my second favorite member. Genius has always been my number one. Like, especially when Liquid Swords came out,
Yeah.
it hooked me in. Every beat is fucking ridiculously woo and just fire. It had the perfect samples. Liquid Swords might be the best opening song from the East Coast on an album. The way that Shogun Assassin intro comes on with that eerie fucking music
Mhm.
into the dun, 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 it just RZA hit everything on that album with him. And of course, Cold War labels, Fourth Chamber, Shadowbox, and I Got Your Back. I love the whole album, and much like you on the last album, I can name every track on this, and it would be a fucking hit. So, Liquid Swords. It was really hard not to make it number 1, but I settled on 3.
The
And
only reason I didn't put it on this list is because of the next album. I was like, I can't have 2 albums. Like,
No, and this is the Jizz. I always screw this up, but this is the Jizz album with where he names all the record labels, right?
Labels, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good album. That's a good album. I love that pick. So what kicked it off, Kane? What's your number 3?
36 Chambers, Wu-Tang. I was like, I really want to put Liquid Swords on there, but I got to put 36 Chambers. When it came out, I was like, who is this? Oh, this is Wu-Tang Clan. I was like, Wu-Tang Clan. Then I found out it was a bunch of dudes. Started listening to it, and I loved the whole kung fu thing that they brought into it. The song Method Man, Bring the Ruckus. It can be also simple. I think Cream was the first song that I heard off of it.
Wu-Tang Clan ain't nothing to fuck with.
Oh, there you go.
Genius had his own solo song on there too.
It was so groundbreaking. So I can remember hearing that for the first time too. Did not make my list because I was pretty sure someone would bring it up and give it love, but
Yeah.
definitely was on my
Ooh,
honorable mention. Definitely was on my
ooh.
honorable mention. I know. But it's only 10. This is fucking hard, You got to make sacrifices. And, the Shaolin Wu-Tang first album, which should be on it, but it didn't make mine. So I'm glad you brought it up, which brings us to number 2. I played this tape out. It was one of those albums where you couldn't read the writing on the tape anymore from flipping it so much. 1991, we're going to, and it's the self-titled album by Naughty by Nature.
I'm glad you picked that.
This is East Coast hip hop at its finest. And it sounds crazy for someone who's sold millions and millions of albums. I think Tretch is underrated as an MC. Like, he should be listed with the lyricist and his fast flow. That shit was all way before its time. Tretch is a top lyricist, and I don't think he ever got overshadowed by the anthems, right? The hip hop parades and the OPPs and whatnot. But Naughty by Nature had the rare skill. This is a hard skill to have. They could make a song that soccer moms would be playing in their minivan, and dudes on the street would be playing while slinging rocks. And they didn't lose street credibility. And those same different people would be listening to that same song. You know how hard that is to do? That's near impossible to do that. It's damn near impossible. And Naughty did it for multiple albums. And this is my favorite Naughty by Nature album. There's no fillers. It's just straight dope song after dope song. This is a 5-micer. Ghetto Bastard, Everything's Gonna Be All Right, whatever you want to call it. My favorite Naughty song. On here also, of course, OPP, Uptown Anthem, 1, motherfucking 2, motherfucking 3. Yoke the Joker, Guard Your Grill. Number 2, Naughty by Nature, self-titled. What do you got, Raven, at number 2?
1993's Wu-Tang, Enter the Wu-Tang, 36 Chambers. It's in my opinion like a perfect CD. It's speaking of five micers. Every member brought their best game on that. And then especially when you learn the story about everything it went through to make that album, it was that rare fucking flash in the pan that could never be replicated and never was. So yeah, fucking Enter the Wu-Tang's 36 Chambers.
And on paper, it doesn't seem like that's too many rappers to have in a group, right? It's not gonna work.
Yeah, it really hadn't been heard of at that point. And my little brother Creepy X brought over one of those VHSs he had recorded videos on from like the box and shit, and it had Mystery of the Chess Boxing on it. And we went and Sam Goodies and bought that cassette tape like that weekend. So.
And what's also amazing, how each group could then went out and got their own record deals, had their own dope albums, solo wise.
Started, yeah.
That's amazing what Wu-Tang did. I mean, just
I mean,
amazing.
their camp made my list 3 times now that I look at it.
It should have made my list, but it didn't. Kane, what's your number 2?
Ready to Die, Biggie. Like you said, just from front to back. Yeah, I can listen to it play through. When I listen to it, I do wonder, like you said, like, what if we would have got, 5 more albums from him? Who would he have done songs with?
Right.
Him and Pac, make up and do songs together, and like just what could have been from him.
Which brings us to number 1. My number 1 changed the game and brought on imitators who tried to capitalize on what this group for the first time did in hip hop. I'm going to 1991's. This might surprise people because I'm usually more of the hardcore hip hop. I'm going with A Tribe Called Quest, Low End Theory. They took jazz and mixed it with hip hop like it had never been done. And after this record, when people heard that, you had the Diggable Planets and the US3 and all these groups were trying to capitalize on the jazz hip hop mix. But this record is the first time it happened. This also really, although leaders of the new school were out there, this really took Busta Rhymes to a new level. People heard him on Scenario, and I think that's what launched his solo career. Was his verse on Scenario, I think, made his solo career. So that's a very important point in hip hop. I really think they invented a new genre, that jazzy hip hop, and people were copied it for, all through the 90s. We're really trying to make that same sound. But over 30 years old, it still holds up. There's no skips. Top songs are Scenario, Check the Rhyme, What, Bugging Out, Show Business, Infamous Date Rape, Jazz. I just love this record. Tribe Called Quest, rest in peace, Fife, Diggy, Dog. What is your number 1, Raven?
My number 1's kind of weird. Most people, think I'm tripping when I talk about being in my top CDs of all time because it's nothing that anyone ever sees coming. It's 2000's Beanie Siegel, The Truth.
That's a good record.
I remember when this came out, I was like, this is a 5 mic record. Speaking of 5 mic records, I love From the Open to the Close. It was like the first mainstream Beanie Siegel album, and it was just to debut the way he did. He was way harder than Meth Bleak ever could have been, even though I liked Memphis Bleak at the time. I was never a Jay-Z fan. I think I've heard The Blueprint maybe once in its entirety. Reasonable Doubt was good, but I never really followed him anywhere past that. And then I heard American Gangster and thought that was a good album. But aside from that, I never really messed with Jay-Z. But his crew, I always thought was way doper. I loved Emil. I loved Memphis Bleak. And the Beanie Siegel was my favorite to come out of there. Who Want What with Memphis Bleak. Raw and Uncut with Jay-Z. Mac and Brad with Scarface. He had Kanye West, Just Blaze, and fucking Rockwilder production on the album. It was 2000s hip hop, but it was just rugged New York 2000s hip hop.
I recently did an interview with an MC from Philly. His name is King Shams, and we were talking about how underrated Beanie Siegel was and is. I mean,
yeah,
I think he's super underrated, and he put out a handful of really dope albums. Besides, The Truth, The Becoming, I remember really liking. So what is your number one album, Kane?
Stillmatic by Nas.
Hmm.
It's my favorite Nas album, and I love Nas. I love his flow over the beat. It's so ingrained into the beat. He's so like he's not on top of it. It's so like it's part of the music. He flows like when the beat was made, he was rapping with it when it was made. It's so ingrained, and I love that about him. Stillmatic took number one because of the creativity of the album. From Rewind, doing the whole song backwards. I the first time I heard that, I was like, "What? What is that? Hold on, let start that over. Like, where is he going here?" And then, in one mic, when he does how the beat builds up, he starts with just a few instruments and then he adds a little bit more. And his voice, as he's adding more, he's getting more hype with it. And, that's how like the first two verses are. And then the third verse, he starts hype and then he breaks it down and goes down. Like, just so creative.
That is such a good record. And I never heard anyone explain Nas's flow that perfect. That's actually perfectly explains him. It's like he's part of the music. That's so perfectly put. I mean,
100%.
yeah. And one
Nas
mic.
is one of the GOATs for sure. And that is my favorite album from him as well. For this, he said every reason I could have agreed with, but yeah.
Yeah, that is a great record. That is a great record, and it was on my honorable mentions. So that is the top 10. Now I got a bunch of honorable mentions. I feel bad that some of these weren't brought up. Honorable mentions start with, and I know I got the vinyl back there, Nas Illmatic, the one that started it all, as a top debut album. Run DMC's Raising Hell, that had so many big hits, from Walk This Way to Run's House to My Adidas. No, Run's House was on Tougher Than Leather. It's Tricky was on Raising Hell.
Yeah.
KRS-One, Return of the Boom Bap, Out of Here. I just love that track. And the KRS-One self-titled one, with like the brown cover, that had some great tracks on it. Big Daddy Kane, Long Live the Kane, Biz Markie, Going Off. My number 11 was Slick Rick, Great Adventures of. Mobb Deep, Infamous. That's a good record. D Nice, To the Rescue. If you don't know that record, it's dope. Big Pun, Capital Punishment. Redman, There's a Dark Side. Smith and Wesson, The Shining is an underrated album. And I had him put it on my honorable mentions because it's a fun record to me. Onyx, Back the Fuck Up. Top 10 East Coast albums. And there wasn't too much overlapping, which I thought could happen because there's just so many to pick from.
Yeah.
This was the hardest list yet. There was too much to look through, especially I was an East Coast kid, so I grew up on a lot of these artists, and it was so hard for me to be able to be like, yeah, Genius is definitely better than Method Man and Inspector Deck, but it's 10. I only had 10.
I knew there was going to be people that are brought up that I was like, oh yeah, like that I didn't even think of because there's just so much.
Right. No, that was a good list. Have a good night.
You too, man. I'll talk to you soon.
See ya.
It's fun.
Peace.
Fun as usual. See you next time.
See you next time.
B-boy, from the old to the new, still a B-boy. Too bold for the school, still a B-boy. East Coast to the West, B-boys worldwide.